Jade, the first thought you had, as Dr. Your husband has just said, that it is not going to work because you're from different countries. What made you think that? Do you have an experience of it, or did you hear stories that kind of intimidated you, or in your own belief system at that time you thought, no, this is no?
Yeah, I was just throwing the question to him, see how he answers. And he answered well. We're still here.
He convinced.
Chinese wisdom, you better watch out.
He convinced you.
Yeah, still so far still convincing me. Yeah. So yeah, we're still together. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Wow. Well, I like the answer. Yeah. So Dr. Joseph, you played a very good game over there, trying to convince her. Good. Thank you for that answer. Troy and Karen, we want to know the historical event or how you guys met, started all this relationship together.
So we met in graduate school. We had we heard the Lord that he wanted us to go to China. And so we had sought a way to get to the calling that we had received. We ended up passing on the same program and then joining the same graduate program. And so the first time I noticed Karen, she was very gregarious, full of life, exuberant. And so we were at a barbecue of which I was grilling carne asada and onions and bell peppers on the grill. And Karen was the center of a discussion of all the cohort members at the table. And I couldn't, she was just so communicated so well. And she was just the center of attention. And I was grilling the meat, the beef on the grill, and I couldn't keep my eyes off her. That's from my.
But he didn't pick me first. People just be making up stories as they go along. There was another Black girl he liked first. Let's be very clear. But yeah. So after that, after she did not live up to his standards, then it was so funny because your other guest was talking about different cultures, and even though we have both blue passports, let me be very clear that our cultures are totally different, and that our life experiences have been totally different, and the difference raises its head almost every day about how we view things and how the lens in which we see things. So totally a different experience.
East Coast, West Coast.
Yeah, East Coast, West Coast. This again, if I would have married a Black man, there would have not been so many different understandings of just basic things. We had a conversation even before this video started about what we felt was different and noteworthy. So anyway, but yeah, so after that what was so surprising, again, a cultural difference. When we first started even having a conversation, like the next day, I remember his sister was in town, and he was like, we had only gone to this horrible movie on Friday night. We had gone to the mall on that Saturday with his sister, and like that Sunday, he summoned me to his dorm room and said, "What are we doing? Because I only date the married." Bruh, you just took me to a horrible movie on Friday night, and you want to talk about marriage? What's your name again? Like, what's your last name? I really don't remember. So for me, that was very forward, very taken aback, and I'm just like, so you only gonna take me out and do things with me if I'm on the road to marriage to you? And so it was really shocking to me to have such a conversation 3 days in. But
probably 3 weeks in. I went.
No. See, again, these timelines, they really don't match up. Culture difference.
So Karen, I want to ask, what came to your mind immediately, like Troy expressed interest in you, what were you thinking about, the culture difference or the skin complexion difference, or what your families or friends are gonna say, why dude, and all this? Were you thinking about all these things?
Yeah. No, not at the time. And I will tell you, I'll leap forward a year afterwards. Once he proposed to me and we were literally on the plane to go back from America after being in China for a year, it was not till we landed that I was like, oh, he's white. Oh my goodness, this is gonna be an issue. And because we had been separated from our family. Dr. Charity's heard this story. So but I was literally in shock. It was not until he left me, because again, we were West Coast, East Coast. He left to go to California. He was coming to my home in North Carolina in the South the next week. And literally, because we had been in China for a year. So in China, race doesn't matter. You're Wagarin no matter what. Like
foreigner or you're Chinese.
You're foreigner
Yeah.
or you're Chinese. There's
Even
no
if you're in America, you're
separation
still a
between
Wagarin.
that. Yeah. It's no separation. So we never felt like different in China because they didn't. I mean, you're just a foreigner. Period. In the statement. So we never had to really deal with. Only thing we were trying to do is survive being a foreigner in a foreign land. So we never really dealt with the race issue. And literally, we got off the plane. He got off the plane and said, "Oh, I'll see you in a week." And the whole 5 hours and a half to the west, to North Carolina, I was like, "Oh my goodness." Oh, and I literally put the ring in my pocket because I was like, I got to think about this. Like, this is not going to go down. Even though I knew we were going back to China after we got married, I was like, this is really not going to go down well. And because of my background, I had been in the NAACP. I had been part of the Nation of Islam. I had, like nothing in my background said white man coming. Like nothing. Pan-Atlantic Council, like nothing in my my background said, white man coming. Like African Council, Positive Student Union. I went to the Women's March. Head of HBC. I was the student body president at a HBCU, historically Black college and university. I also was I was the president of the HBCU council.
This is Sister Soldier, okay? This is the epitome of Black woman, okay? Sister Soldier. So there was no I'm marrying a white man in my future in her background. That's what she's telling y'all. Like
this is incredible.
Yeah. Now you see the difference here.
What God will do. How God will change your story up on you real quick.
Amen. No, that's God.
That's awesome. So it's not about all the backgrounds and all that. Anything can change at any moment. So you just have to be sensitive to love, right? So Dr. Campbell, these are wonderful introductory stories by our guest. What do you have next? Yeah.
But see, for what I want to know from our guests is like, of course we have the introductions, how you met, but if you've been together for more than a month, which all of you have, you've encountered some type of challenges, whether it was cross-cultural communication challenges, whether it was just differences in your likes, your interests, music, like what you like to do, hobbies. What are some of the challenges that you faced? And I'll bring it to the Castillos first. Like, what were some of the initial challenges that you faced as an intercultural couple?
Yeah, well, I was just so enjoying Karen and Troy's story. I mean, wow, really, really, really interesting story. Amazing. And what a work of God. I mean, definitely shows the handiwork of God. Incredible story you guys have, and definitely a story for the hour here in America, really, that people need to hear. But as far as me and my wife, you could get her response first, I guess, and then I'll give mine, because we have different stories,
Yeah, always. Yeah. I think the difference is so many. It just everything is different, but somehow I don't know how to explain this. Somehow it just has something the craziness may be the same, but along the way, after you get married, I just got evolved to be more adapt to the marriage, to the kids. But for him, I guess he never changed. The women, they always change, but the men, they never change. So for me, I'm just more like more adapting to his whatever requirements, whatever he's at, and I can adapt to that. So I heard someone, one of my friends said the financial thing is number one divorce reasons. So our financial, I don't know, like a status, whatever, the way for finance, the way different. I think that's probably the big challenge. Yeah. And then sometimes actually he's more like Chinese. Maybe more, I'm more somehow like the US. I like sometimes enjoy the privacy, but he's more like a to my family. So it's very different. So it's interesting. That's what I'm saying. Sometimes you have something in common, but sometimes it's just so big, extreme difference. But along the way, I think I just successfully managed to get used to everything. I get used to all the changes he made. Yeah, I think yeah. And also it's not only love. I think the people married long enough, you find it's maybe the first that love never always enough. It just the commitment and then never give up. It's very plain, but it's very important. It's very fundamental for the marriage. Yeah, I think I've made my mind along the way, all this 10 years. Just you never give up, you work things out. And
Wow.
even with the big challenge in life, the finance and the way I want it to be, it's the way to think about it. That's most like a security thing for a woman. But I think have sacrificed that part. So I just walk along, wash off whatever the problem are. So yeah, so this my side of story, and his side will be probably more fun, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, at one point my wife kind of felt like she had enough. She just can't take it anymore. The way that I spend is just out of control, and
Okay.
she needed some help. So she was asking a friend of ours named Bishop Gill, what do I do? My husband, he spends out of control. His spending's crazy. And he's like, well, tell me about it. What does he do? She's like, he goes to Starbucks every day. Do you know how much a coffee costs at Starbucks? That's like $5 that he just flushes down the toilet every day. What a waste of money. She's like, I can't take it anymore, And and then my friend who's Canadian, obviously Western, Western mentality with finances, he's like, oh, is that all he does? Is that the issue? He goes to Starbucks every day. And he's like, well, you have to understand, Pastor Jade, in America, it's quite normal to go to Starbucks every day. That that $6 a day is not considered being crazy spending. That's normal. So I think that story was really funny, but it illustrates the vast difference between a Western mindset, Western consumerism mindset, and then a Chinese mindset where Starbucks really is a treat, and you just don't go there every day, and it's a special treat, and you save more than spend. Now there are people in America that have that are like that. That's true, but in general, I think the majority of Americans, they go to the movies once a week, they go to Starbucks every day, get the coffee in the morning on the way to work. There is a higher discretionary income spending. So that's a big difference to finances from a Chinese perspective, from a Western perspective. And then the second thing, besides she brought up the finances, but the second big one, because Dr. Larby asked us, what was the biggest thing in the beginning of the marriage? The biggest thing was, I think, trust. The biggest problem we had and the biggest fights we had was over, she didn't know if I really loved her, and I didn't know if she was marrying me for a green card, because I was told my entire life, Oh, the foreigners just want a green card. The foreigners just want a green card. They're just meant you for a green card. So the expectation in the Western mind, and even my family members, and friends and people kept telling me like, oh, be careful when you go to China. Be careful with the Chinese women. They just want a green card. Now I realize that actually
It's for Chinese green card.
the foreigners are very the foreigners are trying to marry Chinese for their green card,
Yeah.
but the tables have turned.
Wow, that's great. So Dr. Kama, sorry, before you come in, Jade made a point that really inspires me a lot. She said, I made up my mind. I quote, I made up my mind. So this reminds me of Dr. Miles Miro. One thing he said about marriage. He said marriage is not about love, it's about decision. You have to make up your mind. So learning from what Jade and Dr. Castillo is saying, we have to make up our minds and overlook. Once you get into it, you're already into it. So it's all about decision to stay in, and that will help to thrive. So that's what I wanted to chip in. Yeah, and I think Jade, you asked the wrong person about, or you talked to a wrong person about the Starbucks issue.
He, that's very little bit of his spending. So what about in the US? I see the people like a consumer like a market. Yeah, he's spent the way too much. He just don't. I mean, is the car this and that, all the desire. But I just along the way I learned, okay, as long as you're happy. I mean, I'm okay with nothing. I'm fine. I'm pretty plain. I'm just very boring, like according to my kids. But I enjoy it. That's who I am. But if he enjoys it, I'll just try my best to support that, because I don't want to get jealous. It's like, why you spend so much? So along the way, I kind of learned to balance. If as long as he enjoys, he don't just sell my house. I have a place to live. Go ahead. Yeah, no saving. It's okay. Yeah.
She said, don't sell my house. She said, it's okay if we don't have no money, just don't sell my house.
Exactly. Yeah. And actually along the way, I think during the pandemic, I think kind of awakening a little bit, but it's no result. People awakening, but they still don't change. So we made a joke. I said, the Chinese with the pandemic, they can live for a year without a job, no problem. But I said, you or a lot of like a culture, like a background, like a Filipinos, wow, they're gonna be broke for sure after 2 weeks. Yeah, they cannot even survive like within a week. So we kind of a joke around, but still it's okay. Sometimes they're awakening, but no change. You're like, okay, just another add on.
Yeah, because when the pandemic started, we were in the Philippines, and it was like they couldn't go to work. Everything shut down. It was martial law. And they're like, the Philippines are like, if we can't work for a week, we're gonna starve to death, because they spend all their money on going out to eat. Like Filipinos like to go out to eat, get the party, But she's like, well, China, they could be locked down for a year, no work. It's no problem.
Think about like a lockdown here, starving to death. The Chinese like say, oh, I already told you, we should have saved up.
Yeah, and you guys know that in Chinese culture, that even when they're making almost no money, maybe they're just a waitress at a restaurant, they save. They could survive a year. I mean, that's one of the good things about the culture that has not rubbed off yet.
Yeah.
So I'm just saved enough for him.
Rubbed off yet.
Yeah, I'm saving enough for him to keep him nice and round. So you see the result. Yeah, I've done. Look at me right here.
Well, Jade, I like
Jade, okay.
Economy, consumer economy. Saving economy, consumer economy.
Goes here.
Well, look, Dr. Castillo, I'm with you with the consumer economy. Clearly. Round people unite, okay? We in here together.
Yeah, find someone safe. Find someone safe. They will support your need.
Okay, I'm gonna have to find someone who saves. Okay. Now, McAdams, how about you guys? What were your initial challenges that you guys faced? And also, what are some of the challenges that maybe you still face now, even with the pandemic? I love that Jade brought up the pandemic aspect, because people's marriages were, if they weren't ever tested before, They were definitely tested during COVID while you have to stay locked up in the same place with the person that you said I do to for weeks and months on end. So, what were some of the challenges that you all faced?
So I'll start for from the beginning. Of course, it was the race. Actually, there's a funny thing about us going to China when um my parents, I think, had heard of Troy, and so Troy had asked me to go with him to China to fly with him, and so he wanted to ask my dad, could he escort me to China? So he's on the phone with my dad, and he's like, my name is Troy, and I like your dad, your daughter, and I would love to escort her to China, blah, blah, blah. And so my dad is on the other side, and my dad's a pastor. And he's like, yeah, it sounds really good, Troy, because we as Black men, we have to da 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 da. And so Troy puts the phone out like this. He's like, I think your dad just called me Black. And so I take the phone. I'm like, Daddy, did you call Troy Black? And he was like, yeah, ain't he Black? I'm like, no, Daddy, he's white. He was like, it's okay, give him back the phone. He loves Jesus. So he gives, I give Troy back the phone. And so that was like definitely one of the first, again, realizations that, oh my goodness, this is going to be different. And I think just in our journey for me, it has been the different, like, because most of our marriage we've lived in China. And so again, even though we're foreigner, he's a white foreigner. And so there is a difference about how he's received. And so we would go to ticket counters and he would give them both our passports and they would put us in totally different seats on the plane. Or we would get on the plane in some countries and they were like, oh, sir, would you like to move up to, these nice seats up in the front so you can have more room? And he's like, well, can my wife come? And they're like, what? So those kind of things have definitely been different for us. And then just like deciding where to go, I think always is an issue. We were in West Africa, and the children in the neighborhood, they were like, yay boo, yay boo, yay boo, yay boo. And so we were dancing like, yay boo, yay boo. We thought it was a welcome song. So then we get back to our host house. We were doing a revival down there, and we get back to our host house and we're like, Savior, they were doing a welcome song for us. Yay boo, yay boo. And he just bust out laughing. The whole house just started to laugh. And they're like, that's the song that they sung when the slave catchers used to come. It means white crafty dog. I was like, we're not singing that song again. So for us, being knowledgeable of those kinds of things when we go places, when we went to Australia, Sydney, I again was not aware of the racial tension there, but we land and literally we were at the zoo and wanted to take a picture with the koalas, and the man behind the camera, a white man, was he was taking all the pictures, and we got up and he was about to take our picture. We were next in line. He walks away from a camera and he's like, I'm not taking her picture. And I'm like, oh, okay then.
Hello, Australia.
And literally we had to wait for 5 minutes while they are in the corner laughing and deciding who's going to take this picture.
Wow.
So again, it has.
How did that make you feel? How did that make you feel, Troy? Like, how did it make you feel?
To be honest, it was more like I saw it out of the corner of my eye. I didn't understand. Like, she's reading the whole situation. She's very socially aware, and I'm maybe on the other end of the spectrum. So I'm like, oh, like they went for a water break or something. Like, I didn't understand what was happening until she talked to me later.
See, Troy, like, you are the problem right here. Look, I'm not gonna take over the show, y'all. I'm telling you, that's the problem right there when you're in a mixed relationship in general, because the things that don't affect you necessarily, they target, the person that you're with, so you might not actually like feel that. So even as a Black woman, we are trained from children to see racism as soon as it happens. So I could understand that. That would be, that's why I wanted to know, like, how did you feel to see this man jump up and say, I'm not taking their photo, because it's a mixed
I think it was
couple.
I think it was a like a 20-year-old girl, if I remember correctly. And again, I saw it, but I didn't understand. See, I didn't even know what like gender, like again, and she didn't tell me till after, and I was like, that's super not cool. Like if I would have known something, I would have said something. But
Okay.
I was focused on my daughter. It looked like koala bears, and Karen, like for the most part, being a strong Black woman, not me, her, like she speaks for herself. Like she will defend herself. And not that I have taken more responsibility in understanding the situation on planes and in travel. Like when we go in Turkey, like through the immigration, I always go second because if something happens, I want to make sure I'm behind her. So like we have made adjustments in understanding like how to protect her especially and be aware of it. But I mean, like in America, you can get by usually if you come with the facts and stuff like that. But overseas, I think is definitely, like to your point, is definitely something to be aware of and be more defensive and protective about. So yes, but for that instance, it was, I yeah.
And that also speaks to a lot of things. Like there will be times that I feel offended, and he's like, "But they were just saying," and I'm like, "No."
Yeah, we were at the
They,
DMV the other day, and basically, uh, working on, or we were at the auto service center, and they're going back and forth, and I had negotiated the price to a certain thing because we're just trying to be economical with our money. And then Karen comes, and we also wanted to address another thing about the hours, and then the guy's like, oh, well, it's gonna be like this, and Karen says, well, why is it like this? Please, all, well, everyone does it this way, and then Karen goes up real high, or she says something like, oh, in my experience, this has happened, and then he goes, oh, he invalidates her experience. He says, well, no, what is actually happening? And so she was insulted, and she went high real quick, and I'm like, whoa, 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 what just happened there? Like I was like, it just
because there
blew
was
up.
a white man telling me that
You didn't know what you're talking about.
I didn't know what I was talking about. And so for me, it wasn't that. So and while he's telling me this, he's looking at my husband like, she don't know what she's talking about. Don't listen to her. And I'm like, I will come over to that counter and introduce you to Jesus. Like you will not disrespect me in front. Like I have no understanding. Just because, first of all, I'm a woman. So we're talking about cars. So it's like you're a woman, and then you're a Black woman. So clearly, you don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like, do you not understand? I have more cars. That's another thing. Like my life experience has been more vast than his just because of our stories. So it's like a lot of things I've experienced, Troy has never experienced. I think that was, had you ever taken a car in for service?
This is the second car I've ever owned, and I'm 38, so like it's the second car I've ever owned. The first one I've actually had to take a lead. The first one I paid in cash with all my savings because I was raised more traditionally and conservatively.
Oh,
I don't spend a
favor.
lot. I'm a saver, and she's a spender, and so that's kind of the dynamic. And so this is my first car, as she mentioned. Like I'm invested in this car because I'm making payments on it, so like I have to take care of this.
Right.
So I'm like I have a kind of like this is
my fourth car. So clearly I have dealt with this and understood this. And so this man is telling me something that I'm like, are you kidding me? Are you really coming for me?
He's probably 28.
Yeah, and a young buck. So I'm just like, bruh, we're gonna bring that in. So those kinds of experiences, and I mean, and then during the pandemic again, your other guest said about saving versus not. I manage our funds. He has graced me to be able to be our manager. But again, we were able to live comfortably during the pandemic because we had saved. But I think that came from a lot of his driving because I did not grow up in a family that would have thousands and thousands of dollars in the bank. And so for me, when we first hit, the first multiple thousands of dollars in the bank, I was like, is this supposed to be there? Like, aren't we supposed to be using this for something? And so I did not grow up knowing that you're supposed to have a year's worth of salary saved up in the bank, just in case something happened. You're supposed to have 6 months of expenses for, whatever, just in case something happened. And so being married to him for 11 years, I've learned that. And so I started to turn our finances into that. So when we came into the pandemic, it wasn't this like oh, we need to sacrifice our life to go to work because we don't have any money. We were like, oh, we're good. But also we had to live with family. And so that was totally different. And
oh yeah, I gotta that. Yes.
yeah.
So I am another point, and this isn't cultural so much. I think it's more personal. Like Erin is grew up very standard, like black, not black and white. But I'm not like this is how you do things.
My dad's military.
This is the right way. Her parents are both first children, so there's a certain way to do things, and that's the way to do it. And like in every aspect, from religion to daily life to how you manage yourself, how you dress when you go on to interviews. Notice my hoodie versus her glittery necklace. So that was the issue we had before. It's like, anyway, so this is a nod to Encanto, and is we don't talk about Bruno, but today we're gonna talk about Bruno. Right? So, so like differences like that, right? But living at her family, I'm very adaptable, and I think it's more of a personal nature than a cultural thing. And so I lived with her family for almost 16 months. And for me, it was more about me I'm more of an introvert. I absorb information. So it's a lot about me looking and listening and learning. And for them, you have to ask Karen what it's like. But like for me, it's just learning culture. And I don't feel different. I feel like, well, I'm just going to figure out what part I play in this situation. And I'm not going to try and, stand up and make myself all loud and seen. But also, if you need me, I'm tall, so I can get something to stop. I can drive the car. Like, what do I need to do to make this situation work? And so that's kind of maybe one of my giftings. And maybe what is it like to have a white man in the house?
Well, again, so reading situations, like he would read something would go down in the house and he would read it totally different. And I'm like, how in the world were you standing right there and you, whether it was conflict or joy, like how did you get that from that conversation? Or again, we have a lot of nonverbal in African American culture. The side eye is going to tell a whole story. The face is going to tell the story. And so he couldn't read that. And I'm like, did you not see my mama face? That was not a time to give a joke. and so those kind of read-offs were like, you need to understand, or even like cooking. Like Troy loves cooking Mexican food, and my mom would be like, what you cooking again tonight?
Second time this week, Mexican food.
Whereas my father was like, oh, this is nice, Troy, but he wasn't getting, there is dynamics inside of the house. And so understanding those dynamics and the undercurrents of how that works out was very, very challenging. And it did come to a lot of heated conversations about, well, we can't do this, or
you have to wear pants to church on Sunday.
Yeah, like wearing shorts to church on Sunday.
I'm from California. We wear board shorts and flip flops, and we praise Jesus as we are.
And we don't do that.
Bishop Joey, you don't do that, do you? Bishop Joey, do you? Do
No,
you even let
no,
people come up in there with the shorts?
No, that's offend the Holy Spirit.
He said that would offend the Holy Spirit.
My kind of
Yeah, moving on. Dr. Castro, before we move on to our next question, you made mention of trust, that when it comes to intercultural or international marriages, people want to marry because of green papers and all that. So I wanted to put a word out there. How would you, or how should we look out for? What should we look out for? In order to avoid this sort of trap. If someone is coming to our lives, or if you are going to someone's life and the person is just coming in just for green card, what are some of the red flags, or what are some of the signals that we should look out for, to pay attention to, certain details in order to avoid such kind of traps?
Yeah, well, I think that probably you have to avoid stereotypes in your mind. I think so, some of the traps are just stereotypes of your mind. Oh, Americans are just like this, or white people are just like this, or black people are just like that. And because like we said, there are some truths as far as, in general, Chinese save more, But she had a good friend that she lived with, that one girl, remember?
Yeah, yeah.
That would just spend everything she had and blew up her credit card, and Chinese girl from Northeast China. So so in general, Chinese might have more savings percentage wise per capita than Americans. It's in the culture, but it's not necessarily true for everybody. So you got to be careful with generalizations. And yeah, they're in some of the mindset I had, because people were saying, oh yeah, Asians just want, they just want green cards, just want green cards. Yeah, there are people in China that want a green card and get out, but then there's a lot of people that
Yeah.
don't like the West, don't want to live in America. And my wife was one of those. She's like, I don't want your green card. I'll rip that passport up. I'll rip my my green card up. She's like, I don't want to live in America. And now she's here. She can't stand it. She wants to go back to China. And so, we got to just be careful of generalizations. But I would like to say that, Karen and Troy's story really reminds me of one thing that really, when I was in, so I'm from Chicago. And so I grew up, I'm inner city, I'm urban, and I'm from the hood in Chicago. I'm from the hood area with urban, and all kinds of hip hop, graffiti, drugs, gangbangers. And I was into all that stuff growing up. And I was in a very diverse neighborhood, Pakistanis upstairs, African Americans across the hall, Dominicans downstairs in my apartment complex. So I grew up with almost every race in my building, so I grew up very, very diverse. So when I got left that environment, I was born again and I got saved and I went to Bible school. I noticed that in the Bible school, people would hang out. There was like the black table, there was the Mexican table, there was the white table. And so we didn't have many Pakistanis in Bible college, but we were in Columbus, Ohio, in the cornfields. We went to Rod Parsley's Bible school. And so I was, I'm half white, half Latino. And so I hung out a little bit with the Latinos. I would go to the Latino table and I would hang out a little bit with them. And I would hang out a little bit with the white guys. And mostly I hung out with the Black Americans, because that's where I felt most comfortable, because I grew up in an urban area. So I grew up with hip hop. I grew up in an urban area. I grew up speaking, an urban, dialect or whatever. And so that was my background. And but I knew how to get along with all of them, because I had white family members, and I know they were a little bit, I just knew how to deal with them and talk to them, so I could hang out with every group. And it was funny, because when I would hang out with the white people, they would make fun of the Black people. When I hang out with the Black people, they would make fun of the white people. And then I would hang out with the Latinos, they would make fun of each other. They would tease each other like, hey, bro, your ears are so big, bro. You look like an elephant, bro. And they would make fun of each other, So I knew I hung out with all three of these races. And I was one of the only few guys who actually, really was friends with everybody. I just hung out in every clique. I'd be in the dorm rooms with the African American guys playing spades at 2, 3 in the morning. Then there were times I was hanging out with the Trump truck, pickup truck, Trump flag guys, and their dorm room at 2 in the morning. And I hung out with every group. And I have to say that Karen really reminded me that I knew that when I was hanging out with different crowds, we did communicate in a different way. Mm-hmm. And when we were with the African American crowd, it was a lot of innuendos. It was a lot of talking about inside jokes. There was a lot of inside jokes going on. And if you knew how to do the inside jokes, you blended right in, And so I had to adapt with the inside jokes and the innuendos. And then when the white people was just very straightforward and direct, and so I really do know that there's a major communication difference within the cultures, And so I found me being able to do the same thing when I moved to China, being able to hang out and deal with and talk to the Chinese people in the same way.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, he said he's from the inner city. He loved the African American culture, because I never really exposed to any culture besides the Chinese all my life. But this last 2 years, I've been living in the US. Honestly, that's the funny thing, I'm not racist, okay? I kind of pray for more.
We all know Chinese are the most racist people.
No, I'm not.
America talks about racism. They have China.
Your
Openly.
husband said it. Your husband said it.
Unashamedly.
We didn't say that. That
Yeah.
was your husband. We just laughed in agreement.
but actually I prefer the African American culture better. I feel like they're more fun to hang out with. Honestly, that's just my personal preference. I think sometimes they're so gifted. A lot of people, they're so gifted. They're so fun to hang out with. They make some jokes. It's just my personality will just like him. He feels like it's not really because he's been growing up in the urban area. I think just personality wise, sometimes you just more draw to those kind of a character personality. Like me, even we have so many differences, but somehow I draw to this kind of a craziness because I'm so stable. I'm just so introvert. I'm just so different. So you can draw to that. And also answer your questions. I think you said what you should be aware of. I think time really explains. So take your time. When you meet someone, it doesn't matter because people may be for something. For example, some Chinese, maybe they're for American like green card. Maybe they want a better life. It is true. But that's not the end. So along the way, if the person still stick with you, maybe because the life in the China, there's some part of the China, it's very poor, very bad. So they were longing for a better life. So after they got a better life, are they still kind of sticking with you? So and a lot of people are afraid of, okay, they gotta take my green card, they take off. That's what they're afraid of. But if along the way, as the American or who whatsoever, you offer that, but after you offer that, the green card, so on, and the person's still with you. So how are you gonna tell the person's still gonna stick with you? Only time will explain. For example, there's some people they marry to the rich. I mean, probably they love the comfort of life. They prefer, that's my preference. Okay, I think that's no problem. But after the money is gone, are the person still like faithful to the person they married to? I think that's the question. So the question for that, you just have to really take time to get to know the person. I always tell people probably at least half a year, if you know the language very well, to a year, because you can tell the little things, they're for something. Actually, you can tell, but you have to open your eyes, get to know the person. And then if they're for something, like the people they married to the Chinese, and then a lot of people here, they say, I heard a lot, for love. But when love is gone, they left.
Wow.
So it's okay at the beginning for love. But what about the end? What about along the way? After the difficulties in life appears, and then are you going to still stick to the original love and move on with the person? So, a lot of people just, that's my opinion on this green card part. Like even for Chinese green card, because when we got married, like Jesus, when you're married to Jesus, you're going to have all the benefits. But are you going to abandon him when the difficulty, the problem occur in your life? So same thing with marriage. So yeah, when we got married, I probably gonna get a green card for sure, because I have to come down here, so on. But is that all? And I'm gonna take off? No. So that's why you really have to take time to know the person. Are you guys gonna get along well? So that's really a major problem. I see a lot of people here, they just divorce, so on. So they're just confused.
Wow, thank you, Judge, for that. I like what he said. You have to open your eyes. There's a popular saying that love is blind. And today, Jed is telling us, open your eyes and look out for some of the red flags and some of the sensitivities that will come out of it. Don't say love is blind and you close your eyes and, get into something you don't even know where you're getting to. So thank you for that. Going on to the next question. I know Jed and Dr. Castillo, you have two beautiful boys. Men, we use, handsome for boys, but your guys are so handsome beyond the word handsome. That's why he's beautiful. Yeah. So, how are you gonna, train up your kids to be culturally diverse, to have this multicultural, like to have love for America, love for China, so that when they grow up, they will not be one-sided, but they will identify themselves with Americans and Chinese concurrently?
Yeah, you had something?
No, that's a good question. We ask the kids that all the time because we're wondering, how do they see themselves? We said, are you Chinese or are you American? Are you Chinese or you're American? And they always I just like to see how they respond, to see what they're thinking. And the first year, they were like, no, we're really Chinese. We're not like these crazy Americans. We're really Chinese. Because especially in Oklahoma, where we're at, this is like the capital of marijuana shops. There's marijuana shops everywhere. And everywhere you go, people it just looks like people are on drugs everywhere you go. You're either on drugs or you're a Christian. And we kind of think the people who are on drugs are more normal than the Christians here, you know? So we keep asking the kids, are you American or you Chinese? And they began to say, they always say, no, I'm a Chinese. No, I'm Chinese. But now it's starting to change a little bit. I think they're getting used to the comforts of America. And now just recently, Asher said, you know what? He said something like, oh, I don't like Chinese people. I said, what do you mean? I thought you loved China and you see yourself Chinese, He's like, well, no, I like China, but not Chinese people. American people are more, more my style. So he's becoming Americanized. He's starting to kind of think, he's, obviously, probably through just, meeting kids and living in America, and maybe some of the culture, maybe like the, Marvel comic books, could just kind of absorbing the Western culture. He's kind of seen himself as an American boy now, and kind of enjoying the American culture. So I think they're both losing their Chinese identity. And for Ethan, he was born and raised speaking Chinese. I went to an all Chinese school, but now actually within 6 months, he forgot how to speak Chinese, within 6 months. So I don't know if we'll ever be able to get them back to the Chinese identity thing. So we're going to have to really be intentional, I think, about, making sure they study Chinese, speak Mandarin, appreciate their culture, because you don't want them to grow up despising one culture or the other. We want them to grow up appreciating both. I appreciate Chinese culture, and I appreciate both. And that's why I think mixed marriage and intercultural marriage, I think it's more exciting, because it's not just the boring, I know you, you know me, but it's a lifetime adventure of learning the culture, understanding the culture, embracing the strengths from one culture, and also recognizing the weaknesses in their culture and your culture.
Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah, Asher never told me that.
Jade, before you come in, Jade, how do you feel, the boys identifying themselves more as Americans, Americanizing themselves rather than Chinanizing? How do you feel about that?
But yeah, I don't see that, honestly, because right now we're living in the US. So the kids may develop some interest in the things in the US, but while they were in China, they're gonna develop things in China. So I think why you see that. So I never feel that way. Honestly, I never feel they're more Americanized. Maybe because they have to adapt to everything here, but it's not because I just don't see that. I think sometimes I teach the kids just in a biblical way. You don't have to see the culture, because in culture there are differences as well in the same culture. Like the Chinese are quite different. And also in America, of course, it's a very, very different. So everyone. So as you teach them, you just teach them the truth. So what's the wrong? What's the right? So they can, based on the right or wrong, they will judge it. And also the parents, you're the good example to them. I remember when I grew up, around my atmosphere, you always heard oh, the Japanese, they were bad. They started the war and blah, 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 so on. So you create the hates toward the Japanese. So it's very common for a lot of Chinese, they hate the Japanese. And still you can see, the TV show going on, the Japanese kill so many people, so on, so on, so on, I mean, it is true, but it is history. And also not everyone's like that. I'm sure during the war, the Japanese between Chinese, the war, and a lot of the people, they're not for that, but they have to do that. So the same thing, and then so that's why, when I grew up, I thought, okay, the Japanese, they're really bad. But then you found out there are some really nice people, nice Japanese. And the same time, you see there's a lot of Chinese, they're very evil. But also there are so many nice Chinese. So that kind of woke me up. Actually, it's not about what's the race, what's the culture. It's about like who you are, how you grew up, what's your background. So right now, actually, I'm creating the background for them. It's not about, okay, the race. It's not about the past, but it's about what's right and wrong in the biblical way. So if very simple, it's, everything is come to the root, come to very simple way. So you explain the biblical way. I say, you know what? Because they grew up kind of in church. So I told them, then people come and go. They've seen a lot of craziness, actually, especially here. So I just told them, sometimes I check on them. I said, listen, guys, I just want you to know it's not because you guys, or because Jesus people left. It's just because sometimes people, they have pain in their lives. They haven't deal with it properly. So they will manifest a lot of problems, not because you, because sometimes you take it for like a personal way. So I said, not because you guys. So they say, yes, mommy, I know. And so when you explain to them what's the root, what's the problem real is, so they understand. So even there are kids, you think, oh, it's kind of complicated. But when you explain the root, actually a lot of people, they hurt people. So if you explain them that way, they are hurt. That's why, they act that way. And then they feel the compassion for them instead of just judge them. So they will pray for them. So basically, with the culture too, the culture, sometimes I'm just jokingly say, oh, oh my gosh, you guys too Americanized with the food. Okay. No fried, no Coke. So it's more like a jokingly, but I see, that's, when you just speak to the culture, it's very limited. But when you just be very fundamental on the biblical term, what's the Bible say and what Jesus will do. So that will come to very it will simplify everything, even simplify the problems.
Right.
Yeah, we don't want them to be more Chinese or more American. We want them to be more Christian.
Yes.
Exactly. As the scripture says, train up a child the way he should go. When he grows, he will not depart from it. So that's a perfect answer for that. Mike Adams, what about you? How are you bringing up your kids, in order to be culturally diverse?
I think for us, it's quite different. I mean, you have an African American, you have a white European American, sorry, and then you have we really have a Chinese daughter. Our daughter was born in China. Okay. Her first language was Chinese. Wow. She stayed home with IE. IE is like the housekeeper for the first. She didn't go to school until she was 3.5. So her main language was Chinese. And I had to learn Chinese to speak to my daughter. There were words she did not understand, did not know. And so for the first formative years of her life, she really acted like a Chinese because she mirrored our IE. We worked for 8 hours a day. We saw her, I mean, she, when she's young, she goes to bed at like 6:30, 7 o'clock. So we may have saw her 2 hours awake. So all of her play, all of her responses, even her facial expressions at times, I'm like, you look like Xiaoping. Like, what? Why do you look like that? But she was getting all of that from China. One of the biggest adjustments was bringing her to the US and letting her stay here for 2 years, because it has totally changed part of her demeanor. When she was in China, it was very a little bit reserved. I mean, she's always been outgoing, but like a little bit reserved, more Chinese, more like, okay, like if you ask her to do something, okay. Then she came to America and she started watching YouTube, and she went to school with these bratty children. And she's like, oh, I can say no. And I'm like, no, you can't say no. Like, that didn't change because the African American part of me is coming out. But I think, and for her, it's actually been a learning experience for us, because she hates the word black and white. She says, Mommy, you're not black, you're dark skinned. And Daddy, you're not white, you're light skinned. So in our household, we don't do black and white. We do, oh, they were light skinned, or they were dark skinned, or they were brown skinned. She does not, she cannot conceive of black, white yellow or whatever, Hispanic, or like she's like, they're light skinned or they're dark skinned or they're brown skinned. And so I think for me, it's been really eye-opening to see that the world through her eyes. And so now she goes to a bilingual program where she was with half Chinese children, half American kids, and definitely again her after school program is Chinese. So for us, it's like learning her culture. She really is third culture.
And yeah, I would echo that and say she's in a very unique situation that wouldn't be a typical um, cultural or racial kind of tension there because she was born and raised in China. She has really a broad concept of different people groups and people just being different, and that's been okay. Like when I go to school, when I'm with IE, when I'm with Daddy, he likes to joke. When I'm with Mommy, she's very organized and structured. So she has been able naturally to be able to compartmentalize and yet blend at the same time. Like she's traveled quite widely. She's probably been to 15 different countries. And so when we first came to America, this was before we moved back. This is maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and we were driving from North Carolina to Maryland. We crossed the border like into Virginia, and she's like, "What country are we in now, Mommy and Daddy?" And we're like, "We're still in America." And then we went from Virginia to Maryland, and she's like, "Now what country are they in? What language do they speak here?"
Right.
Like,
and I was like, well, there is a different language here, but
different dialect for sure. But like she just has this international complex understanding of the world as being this complex, beautiful, diverse thing. And she's part of that. And she knows that her role is like to bring light and bring love into the situation. So I think she's in a very unique situation, but also it has protected her from the racial tensions of America. And then, as Karen mentioned early on in our relationship, like we were kind of what's the word? We were siphoned off from all the distractions of American noise.
Yeah.
And then she was also siphoned off from all the cultural racial tensions here. So that when we came here as an international family. We didn't come here as, okay, now I need to establish my white identity and black identity. It's like, no, like we have this broad mindset, as you guys know from traveling and open your eyes to the world, that allows you to bring a different value and see the value in different cultures, different people, different places. So I think she's super blessed in that way. And we've been privileged to be able to provide her those experiences, but also, as Karen mentioned, to be able to understand her perspective and how she kind of perceives the world is very interesting and encouraging.
And also her name, like her name is Kendall Grace. I mean, setting fire with God's love. And so we were very intentional about her understanding that she had purpose. And that's like one of our big pillars of our ministry is helping people to understand that you were created with purpose, on purpose and for purpose. And so you weren't just dropped on earth just because. Like there is a reason God needed your being to be here. And so that's really how we raise her, is like through the eyes of why you were created, not to be a subgroup of some type of culture. It is, you are created for this time in this space. You could have been in the 1800s. You could be in 3030, but God decided to drop your personality, your traits, your abilities, your anointing in this time and space. And you need to take full hold of that, even at your 7-year-old self. Like you need to take full hold of that and make that part of all of who you are, and how you make decisions and how you interact with people. It's like God made sure that you met these people. God made sure that you were part of their lives. And that's a big part, that's a big thing. And you need to understand what that looks like. And that's how we have, as we have grown in our faith and understood why God called us together. I remember sitting at a family member table, and they were like, "Wow, y'all can't get married. Y'all are from 2 different races, and how can God use that?" And they had like a legal pad of 8 pages full of why
a litany of reasons
of reasons why we should not get married. And at the end, the person said, "Well, will you guys be better together for God or apart?" And
I think, let me break that in simple, like, would your ministry be more effective of you doing it individually or you guys doing it together? And despite the racist legal pad, like, I think that was a good gut check question to be like, oh, wow, like if God has called us to do this thing together, we are going to be more productive, more successful, more kingdom impactful together than apart. And I think it's a question we come back to often.
And it's a good question for any marriage. When you are looking at marriage, you have to look at I think Jay said it so eloquently earlier. Eyes wide open. Like, do not go in this like, oh, I'm just gonna be in love and we're gonna, every night we're gonna be this. Please, it is not. Let me be very clear.
Crystal clear. Clarify for the people.
Let me put a magnifying glass on that. That ain't where it is. You have to understand that you have been called to this for the kingdom's sake, really for those who call themselves. We call on the name of Jesus. You believe that you are a believer. You are a follower of Jesus Christ. This has to be paramount in your decision to become married. That we are doing this because this is the best thing for the kingdom of God to come on earth. And if we are doing this together for the kingdom of God to come on earth, God will be glorified. And this is why we're walking down this aisle, not for ourselves, because we're already crucified of the flesh. We are crucified with Christ so that we can live. This is why we are going to say these vows. We are committed to Christ because we want his name to become famous. We want to be able to be an example of who he is in the earth. And so therefore we take these vows so that our God can be seen and be glorified. And that becomes your mission. That becomes your passion, and why you say yes and make that decision every day.
Wow, I love that circle.
Pass the money.
I
Pass
love
the
that.
Starbucks. We are making this decision.
I mean, that's what it is.
We are making this decision because God has called us together. I love the part. What God has put together, not what you put together, but what God has put together, let no man put asunder. So when I'm mad as all out and I want to help him pack his bags, I come back to what has God called together, right? What has God put together so that I can go to 32 countries as a Black girl from the South in a medium household income? Because I understood when God called us together, he had greater. My whole goal was to get to China. As a Black girl, I never thought of going to Gastonia and to Mesopotamia and to Albania. I didn't even know where Albania was. Literally, I was like, where are we going? Where's this plane going to take us? God will open up a window and pour you out so much when you are aligned with what he's called for your life. Because before the beginning of time, he wrote it out for you. He's the best story maker ever. I would have never chosen him on my own, but God did this. And so therefore I am reaping the benefits of what God set up. Because in my eyes, he was never in my dreams. You know, like the man of my dreams. That color never showed up in my dream. I did not dream in black and white.
I think
was dreaming in full color.
Actually, no, I want to ask that. Dr. Castillo, for you and Jade, can you agree with Karen? Were you two like each other's dream? Like when you thought about the person you wanted to marry, did you say, yes, that's exactly what I want?
Yeah, for me, I never thought, a lot of people say that like in my dream one. The thing is, I never thought about that. I never really had a picture. So I'm more like, okay, along the way, okay, it's the work. I'm more practical. So I never dream. I don't like weddings. Actually, I don't even, and then he liked it more. So he planned it. I just did that for him, actually. So yeah. So so I never really dreamed. But it's kind of also the shock. I marry someone, now I thought about,
Sometimes she says like, sometimes and she hasn't done it recently, but like for the first 7 years of marriage, she'd be like, is this real? Like she's like, she wakes up in the morning, she's like, is this real? Am I really married to you? You know.
I don't know if that's good or bad. Let's just say that's good. Because the way you said it, I don't know if that's good or bad.
It's a culture shock to grow up in in China in her city where there's no foreigners, right. Never saw a foreigner in her life, and then flip this half of the life. She's married to a foreign person with little foreign kids, we're in America now, and she even calls the people here foreigners.
Thanks a lot, Jade.
The foreigners here,
Thanks a lot, Jade. You're in my country calling us foreigners. Thanks a lot.
And I said, honey, they're not foreigners. These are the Didi Dao, Tushang Tujang, these are the locals. These are not the foreigners.
No, I was talking to the Chinese. Okay, here. Yeah. So we're just as a right, like, okay.
But no, I never knew I would marry a Chinese lady. It's never my million years I ever thought about it. I always dreamed it would be like I would marry like Selena or something like that, or Kim Kardashian or something like that.
Selena, that's your Latino side coming out.
Yeah.
That's your Latino side coming out wanting to marry Selena. No, so let
Somebody
me just
brown.
reiterate a couple of things. I love how you guys talked about your children, because we wanted to make sure we included the kids in the mix. And I do see that there are some questions in the chat, which still align with some of the things that we have. So, but it's just so good. And you see that people are enjoying your stories and what you're sharing. But two things that you said, I'm going to go back up. Dr. Miro said something that I'm right there with you, Dr. Miro. He said, tricultural children. What a blessing. And that's when you think about it, that's what you have. You don't just have, I call them little cross-cultural leaders. Anytime I see a child, because that's my thing. I went to school for global leadership. So anytime I see a child they come from two different backgrounds of parents, yet you all live in another country. That was one of the things that just fascinated me so much about the McAdams and even the Castillos when I met you all, it's just, you have these children who they're not just, bicultural or biracial, like you've placed them in a position to be culturally intelligent. And that's what we really need. Like the way you're training your children, the way you're growing your children up, you're showing them that love doesn't necessarily have a color, that you can be able to love people with all different races, all different kinds. So that way they can help make better choices as they continue to grow up and as they mature. And those choices aren't just about personal or romantic relationships. That's also for their business associations or for professional relationships as they get older. So it is indeed a blessing to have these little cross-cultural leaders who they get to have these real world conversations with you as parents, as who do you identify with? And if one says, well, I identify more with American, like your son Ethan said, I identify more with American as opposed to Chinese, then the follow-up question would be, well, why do you feel that way now? And then to continue to have that dialogue as he gets older. So like you said, he can begin to make sure he appreciates both the cultures and just continue to grow on. So I love that. I love that so much. So there's so many questions here, but the one that I definitely want to ask, because I know it's in here somewhere, how do you decide on which country to permanently live in? Because now I will tell you, I see so many beautifully mixed children now, okay? And y'all can laugh at me if you want to when I say this, but yes, I am African American and I'm also Hispanic, okay? But it's just a little piece. I want to marry someone from a different culture so that I can have the cutest little mixed baby. Judge yourself, okay? Don't judge me. I want the cutest little mixed babies, okay? I want them to be running around looking like they different colors, whatever, I don't care. But but when you talk about moving to another country, now wait, because where are we living? Where are you talking about going to? Like, depending on who you married, obviously most people say, well, the man will be the one to choose. So if the man says, well, we are going back, I hope nobody's up here from this country that I'm about to say, but we're going to go live in, let me choose a different country. We're going to go live in Venezuela. He said, but I don't want to live in Venezuela. Well, that's where we're going because that's where my family is. How do you deal with that? Like, who decides what country you're going to live in, and how do you feel about that? So whoever wants to jump in. Troy looks like he wants to go. So how do you deal with that?
I want to jump in because when you follow God, when you make the decision to do mission and Jesus together, a lot of that like who's going to decide, who says where we're going, kind of goes out the window. Because it's like, okay, God has called us together. We are here now, present where we are, because God has brought us here, and we're going to where God is calling us to go. And so I think there is an element of family planning and agreeing on kind of where you're headed, and that helps with direction. But at the end of the day, it's like, Lord, where are we supposed to be for this season of our life, and how can we get there? So instead of saying, oh, I have to make a decision, you have to agree with it, or you feel the Lord calling me, but I feel the Lord, like, we really have to come to a place to say, okay, we're both submitted to the Lord, we're both submitted to each other, and we're asking God to direct this family because this is his ship, and we're gonna get where he needs us to go. This is his plane, this is his car. Like, we're not riding our own thing to, like, I want, if you look at my planner, you don't see like vision and goals for where I want to go. You see like what God has shown me. And I think you can would say something similar.
Yeah, the place we're living at right now, Chapel Hill, was neither one of our votes. He had voted to go stay somewhere else. I had voted to go stay somewhere else, and we ended up in Chapel Hill. Where we're going in the next few months was on neither one of our lists. I had voted to go somewhere else. He had voted to go somewhere else, and we're going to another place. So I will say though that the conversations have to be definitely had and intentional. And I keep using the word intentional because a lot of times, really, when you go, I think I saw in the comments earlier somebody referenced Titanic. A lot of times when you see portrayals of marriage, it is like this fantasy, and this is just flow this way, and the man does this and the woman does that, and it is magnifying glass against time. It is not that way. All lies, yes, all lies. And so I think being intentional in your marriage is so important. Having those conversations, sitting down and say, because even before we came to this place that we're at right now, I did not know that I would ever want to live in the US. It was just not in my being. I was just like, I don't want to do that. Having the pleasure of living in China and not having the cultural pressures was amazing. I didn't know marriage in America, and I don't actually particularly like it so much in America because we have to deal with so many different things. In China, I mean, someone I saw finances come up. In China, finances are totally different than living in America dealing with finances. Culture, again, we are foreigners. We have a box and we stick with it. Like, you don't have to break it out. You're a foreigner. Right. That's it. Like, don't move. And it was easy because in our box were Africans and Americans and Canadians. I mean Europeans. Like, we had every and I just made a faux pas that I hate. Africa is not a country, it's a continent. So we had Ghanaians and Nigerians, and I hate when people do that. And Egyptians. We did not have Africa in the box. So I mean, we had all of us, but we were all foreigners, and that was our culture. And so it made it much easier to navigate that because our conversation at the table, as he talked about like different tables, was we were making fun of the Chinese, like, that's living in China, that's China, while they were at their table, that's those foreigners. And so it made it so much different and easier to be that. So where to live, for one of our biggest draws to go back to Asia, or what China intentionally, was that life over there was much easier to navigate as an interracial couple, based than what we've had to deal with in the US, and just so many things that happened living in the US. Like when George Floyd died, that was a conversation we had to have. When the riots on the Capitol the insurrection happened, that was a conversation we had to have. When 12 Years a Slave, like sitting down looking at movies, 12 Years a Slave, that was a conversation that if we were in China, probably would not have affected us as much because it wasn't on the TV 24/7. When that insurrection happened versus what happened to George Floyd, when those images, those split screens were happening, when the Chauvin trial was going on, that was a conversation. Like, so a lot of emotion and things, even with our family members. My brother, for example, some of his conversations toward Troy was based through that lens. Like, Troy was not just his brother-in-law, he was his white brother-in-law. And so having those different conversations mattered. So again, where we live, yeah, that has always been like, once we get off the mission field and we're not doing things around the world and we need to settle down, that really will be a heavy conversation to have, because I don't want to give up some of the blessings and pleasure that we've had living globally. And then because we're both Americans, so the trained mind would say, oh, of course you're coming back to America. But America is a whole bucket of stuff that we've just not had to navigate in our 11 years of marriage.
Mm.
I'm glad you said that. Glad you said that. Because I promise you, I do not want to live long term in the States. And people who know me back in the States know that. My parents know she's not coming back. So just ain't nobody gonna get an American green card out of me, okay? I'm not going back to the States. All right, Castillos, what about you guys? How did you choose on what country to live in? Because now you're in America, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Okay.
was hoping you just let Troy and Karen ask that question, because that one is a sore spot for us, primarily because we don't want to be in America. But so without opening a can of worms, I do agree with what Troy and Karen said. I think our thing right now is like, there's a lot, just to add some nuances to it. Like, of course, as Christians, we're like, where does God want us to be? But then after that, it's like, wait a minute, did we hear God? Was this prophet right? Was that prophet right? Was this dream from God? Should we live where we want to live, or should we live where we believe, some epiphany led us to? And so that brings up a lot of questions in that. And some people, like my sister, her and her husband both had dreams on the same night that God wanted them to go to Cleveland, to pastor in Cleveland. So they left the military. He was like a couple years away from retirement in the military. They left she had a good job. They owned a beautiful house. They had a really good life in Chicago. They left all that to be miserable for 10 years in Cleveland. And nothing worked out. Over 10 years, they were depressed, crying. My sister got Bell's palsy under the stress. The church would split and split and split, and they ended up with like one member several times, and finally they left, like, with their lives. They just moved to Florida. They just packed up everything, were able to kind of unload everything and just escape to Florida. And they're living like on somebody's sofa right now. They were much better before following God, Well, if it was really God, then okay, well, then I guess that's the sacrifice you make to follow God. But was it really God is the question, So we had we knew we had to leave China, because we have an international ministry, and we were warned pre-COVID of COVID's coming. She had a dream, so we knew COVID was coming, and we knew that we had to leave the country if we were going to be mobile. So, but where do we go? We prayed about and discussed it and so forth, and landed in Tulsa, which none of us like Tulsa. And one of the reasons we ended up in Tulsa was because my pastor recommended go to Tulsa. So I said, well, a pastor said move to Tulsa. I guess we should move to Tulsa, But I wanted to live in Seattle, or maybe Chicago or Seattle or something like that, not in Tulsa, because I like to be with non-Christians. I like to be with the diversity. I like to be with a diverse, I like Asians and Africans and, Latinos, and we're in cowboy country, we're in Broken Arrow, So I'm probably most miserable of all people being here, So we had to ask ourselves, recently, like, what are we doing here? Is it really God? The pastor recommended Tulsa. Was he saying that is from the Lord? Like, how do we end up here where we don't want to be? And we understand that we both would rather be in China, in at least Asia, even if it's, Vietnam or Taiwan or whatever, but or Philippines. But people make decisions on where to live. Non-saved people make decisions where to live based upon, maybe healthier factors than a Christian, jobs, stable things, career things, these type of things. Would my wife be happy here? Like if I'm from Ghana and I marry a Canadian woman, would she be happy living in Ghana? Like these are, how's she going to feel, right? How is my wife going to feel living in America or in the whitest part of America? And she's not Chinese, you know what I mean? So, I think secular people make probably healthier decisions, where Christian people listen to more prophecies or dreams or pray about things, and they're oftentimes not the right decision, And so we've had to kind of discuss that, like how much of our lives as Christians are we supposed to use the brain God gave us, or how much is it supposed to be we follow some vague prophecy, that might have not been God. When I talked to my pastor, I said, "Hey man, you told us to go to Tulsa. I hate it here. I'm mad at you." He said, "Oh no, I wasn't saying from the Lord. I was just saying because, because this and that political reason, Tulsa's pretty open." I was like, "Oh, I thought you meant that was from God. You're my pastor." He said, No, I didn't mean it that way." So like, how many times as Christians did we just misinterpret the will of God and make the wrong decisions? So right now we're at the point where we're like, we love Jesus. We're mission minded, but let's choose where to live, not based upon a dream or a prophecy, but based upon what will be best for our family. And I believe God would be just in doing that. So that's kind of where we're at with that.
Yeah.
I think is that right?
Yeah, I think we're gonna use more wisdom instead of because in this Pentecost world where he's from. So it's a lot of things involved, like the prophecy, the will of God, a lot of things. And then it's come to me. I said, what about the Chinese? The Chinese don't have any faith. They don't know nothing about Christ, and their life is going to be miserable because of that. I don't think so. So sometimes I think it's come to the balance. Of course, we want to follow God, but same time, if you had the wisdom, following God is not a conflict. So yeah, so now it's true. It's where we were at right now. Like if you would ask me before, I'll say, I'll follow God. But none the big question is I never have a problem following God. But the big question is this from God? So right now we both kind of on that page. Are you sure it's from God or just our our own ideas? Yeah.
Wow. Wow, that's really powerful there. So
I just wanted to add. Sorry.
Okay, Karen, yeah, go ahead.
Because my mentor, she's a bishop here, and she works with TD Jakes, and so I get to talk to her. And when we were making the decision about where to move, that is exactly what she said. It's like, yes, you pray, and then you look at the pros and the cons. You literally write a list of the pros and the cons. Then you make a decision, and then you make that decision better. Like you look for that decision to be better. It is not a spooky thing about working with Jesus. When God told Abraham to go, he said, "I'll take you to a place that I will show you," but he gave him directions along the way. Jesus is not spooky, like, "I'm just going to show you. You just go out there and whatever." God is very specific. When he told Noah how to build the boat, he said, "I want a 1/4 inch this. I want this." When they built the temple. So God is not, we do that a lot and really in the Pentecostal faith. Oh, God spoke, but God is a God of order. And he is a God of provision, and he's not going to set you out there just to be out there and not prosper you, because that's what the Bible says, is that if I'm following Christ, then he's going to bear much fruit. So if I'm not seeing fruit, I'm not following Jesus, because Jesus cursed the tree that didn't bear fruit. So if I am not seeing the godness in what I have decided that God said, it ain't God. If it don't look like God, if it don't produce like God, it ain't God.
Wow. Wow.
Agree. Yeah.
Yeah,
Karen,
agree.
Agreed. Yeah.
I like that. I think we're gonna get you back, Karen. Yeah, I like the sermon you are dropping in here. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, life is spiritual. You can't do life without it. So I love that. Yeah, but we're surely gonna get you to do more spiritual stuff, you know. So, anyways, marrying interculturally, sometimes family members or close friends, sometimes they kind of turn weird, face or comments to you because probably you're Chinese marrying American or you're white marrying black. Sometimes there are some comments coming left, right, center, from family members, from friends, from mates and all that. So my next question to you all is, how do you deal with people who give you strange looks and comments about your marriage? So probably I'll go to the Castillos first.
I'm maybe in this sense more like Troy. I don't notice those things, Maybe my wife has, but I don't notice. I never notice those kind of things.
Mhm.
The people give their
And then they give you, those people that can give strange looks, or they can look like,
not really. They more look at you. Oh, the big guy. Not really, like culturally.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've actually never seen that. But if I do, I mean, what you can do? You just
I suffer a lot because of, it's a big thing in America now, Asian hate. So we get discriminated a lot when we go to Chinese buffets and stuff.
no, it's not
No,
true.
I don't think I don't think we've noticed. There might be, but I don't think
Right.
we've noticed anything. In America, it's much stronger with with black and white than it is with Asian, and it might even be more like if with black and Asian might be less than black and white, because I
Mm.
think there's more more hurts there, so on historically.
Mm.
Right, good. So I like how you keep blind eyes on some of these things not to affect you personally. So I think Mike Adams would have probably more to say on that. So I want to redirect the question a little bit. How do you protect your marriage from such kind of comments coming from outside?
Ooh, that's good.
I'll
Nice
start.
one, Dr. Larby.
Thank you.
I would say God setting us up at kind of being isolated at the beginning in China. Like the first 10 years of our marriage were in China.
Yeah.
And that protected us from a lot of not only the cultural banter and the cultural expectations, but also from our family. Like, yes, we talked to our parents once a week on the phone, but their opinion was much less relevant to what we were facing in China. So we grew together for 10 years before having to face them these last 2 years. But we came as developed, mature relationship as opposed to growing up trying to negotiate that. So I think God took us to the wilderness, but it was a really good experience for us formatively
Yeah.
as a couple. I mean, we still deal with it. To the first question, we still deal with it, but because of the way God brought us up, it's a bit different for us.
And I think, excuse me, had we not done that, I don't know if we would have lasted, to be honest. I'm just going to be very
We might
transparent.
not even been married.
Yeah, well, yeah, we probably wouldn't have been. I mean, if we were in the US trying to navigate our relationship, and again, not just because we were black and white. He was from West Coast, I was from East Coast.
Mhm.
I just remember, I even remember again just coming back and we were engaged, and I was showing before he got there because I was trying to preface, like warn people before he landed, and I was showing his picture, and the some of the remarks that were coming like, Karen, he's white, like that's not even you. And I mean, they were like, "Oh, but he fine." I was like, "Oh, clearly we're gonna do fine," but they were like, "But he's white. Like, how are you gonna deal with that?" And I just think like the family member that literally was very vocal about against the interracial marriage. I think if we had not left the toxic environment, it would have been very hard because even these 2 years that we've been back, again, like he said, he might not see it, but I see stuff. I'm very in tune. That's just one of my giftings anyway. It's to be able to see. I'm a seer. And so I'm just like, oh my goodness, like, did you not just see that? In China, it was more dealing with the women, because everyone is not as awesome as Jade, but there are Chinese women who are looking for that visa. And so to have Chinese women be very overtly toward him. And I was just like, do you see me standing here? Like, I will fuck you in Jesus' name.
Let me introduce you to somebody.
Oh,
Huh?
Yeah, but it was very, and he would come home with stories, and I would just be like, "Are you serious? Like, did you wear your ring today?" And he's like, "They don't care about that." And so I really had, I mean, and even like one lady at our church, and I just had to make sure she understands we're not friends. We cannot be friends, because you cannot continuously try to become a part of my family to take my husband. That's not what we're gonna do here. And yes, I trust him, but again, we're gonna have our eyes wide open. We know the devil is always at work. And so I want to make sure that I'm not open, even with our IE. I was again very like, who you are, you married, like how your relationship with your husband. Like, we're not doing that. You're not gonna be in my house every day thinking that you the wife and I'm just the person that comes in at the end. Like, no, we're not doing that. And so making sure that you are very attentional and aware of the enemy. And again, it's not anything against your spouse, it's against the devil. The enemy first of all, he hates marriage. He hates anything that is unified. Second of all, he definitely hates believers. So whether you married and not a believer, or you married and then you a believer, you really on the top of his list. And then you married a believer and raising another believer, oh yeah, you on his target board. And so being intentional about putting those guardrails up, like, no, you cannot have a WeChat conversation with her. We all three, I don't care if I had nothing to do with it. We all three on the WeChat. We all three on the messages. Because again, you always want to put like my spouse. And the same with me. Like, I'm not gonna have this whole WeChat conversation with one of my Nigerian brothers without him being on the WeChat. We're not going down like that. And so I just had to be very clear, even in Asia, with a lot of different, because people come from different cultures. They're like, well, that's not really, a problem, or that's not really an issue. Like, you don't trust. It ain't even about that. I don't trust the devil. I don't trust the devil. And so no, you ain't going to go help her move nothing unless I'm coming to. He ain't coming over here to help me with. I mean, I had one of the brothers at the church, he was helping me with my thesis. And I'm like, yeah, Troy be home at so and so time. So then you can come over and help. Because again, I'm just not gonna give room to because the enemy, he has been on this earth for thousands of years, plotting and planning. He ain't changed his plan. He just changed the people he targets. And so therefore I have to be cognizant of making sure that I have these guardrails up. And then also, one of the biggest things that you take into your marriage is, this is our marriage. Thank you for your advice. Thank you for how you did your marriage. This is our marriage. And the really only two people that need to be in the conversation is us two and Jesus. Like, we not, because people will tell you, and we've had these conflicts as well. Well, so-and-so, they said, or so-and-so, I went to so-and-so. We have also been very intentional about who we share our marriage with. Like, you're not, you don't get to just come in our marriage and just dump your opinions.
Right.
We have conversations about who we're sharing. Like, if we need a person to talk to, who we're getting counsel from, making sure it's wise counsel. Like, you're not going to go get no crazy person to come tell you, well, your wife should be doing this. Your wife should, first of all, they ain't got
Or
no
how
wife.
you should raise your kids.
Right. Or how you should raise your, let the church say. So be intentional about that as well, because you divorced twice and you telling us how to do our marriage. Well, I tell you, because my first marriage, bring that all the way in, because I'm not even, or people who don't have who have not connected with their purpose. I wouldn't go, y'all going back to China? Like, I don't understand why y'all doing that. Y'all already here. Everything working out fine here. You got a job. You got, why would you just move? Because you're not moving with God don't mean I don't need to move with God. So having those guardrails up is so important, because people will take you down the road that God has prepared for them, and you will miss what God has prepared for you.
Wow, Karen, that was a good one there. That's really a good one there. And I like what he said, the enemy doesn't like marriage, that's why. So most of the times he uses people, family members, close friends, coming to our marriages to poison our minds and all that. So we have to be very careful. Everyone listening to us, guard your marriage. And I like, the defense mechanism you built around your marriage, your attack and defense strategy. I mean, these are all, they are spiritual, but they are, as I said before, I mean, we live in a spiritual world. So everything should, be spiritually minded, so we all have to build that kind of gauge or fence around our marriage in order to enjoy it, safeguard it, and do not allow people to enter and kind of poison it. This is very great conversation, and unfortunately we are heading to our time. It's like 2 minutes to 9. Dr. Campbell, I mean, do you have anything on your mind? Any questions, anything? I hope you have thousands of questions. I saw questions from Moses. Moses, thank you for your intelligent question. I think most of them have been answered here on this show already. Yeah. Dr. Campbell, what's on your mind?
It's just, what's on my mind is the fact that like this just really, it should have been like a conference. Like you just can't take all of this wisdom, and shove it into like 2 hours. But I think we did a good job of what we were able to bring. And I love the diversity from, each of the couples. You think about it, like, Jade represents Chinese, and then you have Dr. Castillo, who represents not just one, he's mixed himself, like he represents
everybody, the Americans, European,
he represents all of them. And then you have the McAdams. You have the McAdams, and they represent. So I just love the diversity that we have, but not just in culture, but also in wisdom and what they have brought. And hopefully, I know that there are so many singles up here, and I just we're going to ask our guests to give some words of encouragement to singles in just a moment. But as a single speaking to singles, let me tell you that you definitely don't want to watch movies and think that your marriage is going to be like that. You want to watch couples like these. This is why Dr. Larby and I put this joint collaborative effort together, so that we can help. Movies will have you out here jacked up and ready to divorce somebody in 3 days. Okay. Like, because they come out walking a different way, or they don't, they don't look the way that, or maybe the package is right. Like, oh, beautiful smile, muscles, banging, body, money, popping, but their person, I mean, they just dumb as a dog. I mean, seriously, like they have no personality. They have, no drive, no ambition. They don't see a purpose for their lives. They just want to walk around daily and just go with the wind. You go with the wind. The WIND. I'm going for the WIN. I'm going for the win. I'm going to find out wherever I'm supposed to be in life and win. And with that person, we can go and create a purpose together. So it's not just about the person. I said this when we did our collaboration last year, when we were talking about becoming the person that the person you're looking for is looking for. Listen to that again. Becoming the person that the person I'm looking for is looking for. It's not about finding the perfect person, because nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. But it is about finding the perfect person for your purpose. And for me, if that's not an American, thank you, God. Anyway, for me, if it's not an American, or if it's for somebody from a different culture, I don't want to be so set in my ways and so biased to say, oh, you come from this country. I don't really want to, I don't want to date you or anything like that, because maybe my family, thank God my family's not like this, but maybe my family or my community or my culture or my church family, because they're so traditional, they wouldn't like you, or they wouldn't, it doesn't matter. Listen, I think it was the McAdams, they said, in this marriage, it's us. This is our marriage. Okay. This is not a community marriage. Okay. When we come together, this is not me, you, and the community and my church leaders and all of them and things like that. I mean, obviously you have mentors who guide you, but at the end of the day, those mentors and those people, they're not coming to pay your bills. They're not coming to build a legacy with you and your spouse. They're not coming to do any of those things. So when we are out here as singles, please make sure that you don't just jump to the first person who says, you're going to be my spouse because I like the way you dress, or you got a vehicle, or you do this and do that. Okay, well, where do you see yourself in the next 5 to 10 years? You don't see it? Okay, because I can tell you right now off the top of my head where I see it. So, just think about those things like that. So that's what I would have to say. Dr. Larby, you want to add anything before we let our guests contribute?
Yeah, this real awesome program. Many people ask me, but you are single, why organizing marriage program? Like, yeah, because no one is gonna organize this awesome program for me to listen. So I have to organize it and listen to myself. Right. So
there you go.
Yeah. So this is really awesome. So our single friends out there, we made this for you. I know Bishop Castillo and Jade for so many years. How many years now? Almost 10? No, not 10 years. Somewhere.
Yeah, I'd say about 10 years.
6 years. Yeah, say I think 2015 till now. And their marriage is really beautiful. Like how they treat each other, how they respect each other, how they support how they support Dr. Castillo in his ministry, traveling with him everywhere. They have 2 young boys, but they kind of supporting building this ministry together. It's really awesome, and I love it. So it makes marriage really beautiful. And I'm like, ooh, I want to get married when you see such kind of married couple together, but when you see other people, you're like, no, I'm scared of getting married, So these are the people we need to have conversation with. But one last thing I want to drop in, trust should be the issue. So when you are getting into an intercultural or racial marriage, you have to be very careful and open your eyes, as Jade said, to make sure the person coming into your life is not coming in as I don't want to use a word, it will sound so rude, but not coming in as someone who is coming in to dig gold, let me put it in a nice way. Right? Yeah, not come to dig green cards or money or anything of that sort, but it's coming in because it's a purpose of God for you, And, I hear stories, many a time that people get into relationship with other race because probably they are good in bed or because of sex. To me, this is a very stupid and foolish idea to base on, to get into a relationship just because of sex. Sex doesn't make marriage, right? Sex doesn't build happy future in marriage or bring, a very good marriage life. So you have to be very careful with that, that the marriage you get into, whether intercultural, interracial, or whatever it is, or whether same culture, you have to place purpose first. And it's not all about love, as Jade said, it's about making up your mind, making a decision, because after 10 years, after 15 years, if you have to ask yourself, do I love this person 10 years ago, 5 years ago? So when the love, gradually diminishes, what is there, your decision is what will sustain the marriage, So we have to be very careful. The greatest opportunity we have now is that most of us are single. If you are married, you're already, there, right? But this for single people. The greatest opportunities we have now is our singlehood, that we are single now. So we can listen to knowledge like this, we can listen to great stuff like this, people's experience like this, to be able to create a great marriage future for ourselves. So if you don't get close to people like this, to listen to their stories, to write a story for yourself, and you just base your marriage feelings on sex, on properties, on green cards and money, you get into it, and the worst thing, which is divorce, will happen to you. So let us take this opportunity to study, to learn, to identify ourselves and identify what we need and pray to God to guide and to lead us. And I believe when we do that, we will avoid the future mistakes. So without talking much, Dr. Castillo and Jade, I'm not going to say what are your last words because this is not the last time we're having you,
Yeah.
So
Well,
what are you
I'd
saying
just
to
like
post
to
section?
I'd like to reiterate what Dr. Campbell said about if your idea of marriage comes from Hollywood. Unfortunately, in the Western countries, and you could probably include Africa too, basically any country that grew up with Disney, from a child, there's a message being told to you from a child, about what love is, what marriage is, that is a false message. And then especially in Hollywood, the agenda has been now for several decades to portray sex before marriage as normal. Even in the recent movie that came out, Eternals from Marvel, which I walked out of the theater in the middle of the movie. Me, my wife, and kids went to go see a superhero movie, and it was full of immorality. We stood up and walked out in the theater that was jam-packed in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the most Christian city in America, maybe in the world. We were the only ones to walk out in the theater, which is shocking to me. But we stood up, we all walked out as a family. And one of the first things that stood out in the movie was they show this couple kiss, go to bed, sleep together, and then the next morning they get married. So that they purposely swapped up the order to sex then marriage. And they just throw it right in there for a whole generation to see. And this is the message that's been sent. If you think about all the good movies in the last 10, 15 years, how many movies have come out that show marriage sex scenes? Very few to none. Most movies have no marriage sex scenes. They're all people who are not married. So, with Disney, they start to, from the Little Mermaid, and every Disney movie is about love. It's about love. It's about love, about marriage. So little girls grew up with that. So they're thinking about love, marriage, relationships, kisses. They're thinking about that 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. And they shouldn't be thinking about that at all. So really, it is just a very, it's a very heartbreaking demonic agenda to cause kids to obsess about things they shouldn't be thinking about. Whereas you'll meet kids in China who are 15, 16, who have never thought about dating at all because that hasn't been fed to them through Disney because the media is filtered there. Now, of course, in recent years, there's a big change happening as there's more Western media that's coming to China. So there's a big change that's happened in the last 10 years in China. But, that's one of the things I want to reiterate. Our concept about marriage can't come from Hollywood. It has to come from real life. And secondly, I just want to say that I said it in the chat, I will say it again, that God gives you a spouse not to gratify your flesh. People who get married for sex or for lust or for love, she's so beautiful, he's so handsome. God doesn't give you a spouse to satisfy the flesh. He gives you a spouse to crucify the flesh. Wow. So in the beginning, there might be the attractions and all those things, but at the end of the day, what's going to happen is everything about that person that's opposite of you is supposed to crucify your flesh, and everything that's opposite about you is supposed to crucify their flesh. So in the end, you have two people that are dead to themselves serving each other. That's the picture of a great marriage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ooh, I don't like that. Oh, I'm honest with you. That's why I'm still single right now. Shoot. Yeah.
Marriage is a cross, actually. It's not
exactly. Yeah.
It's not an orgasm climax, it's a cross.
Yeah, that's right.
Well,
yeah.
Dr. Joey, I mean, I perfectly agree with you with that. Yeah.
But
and that's
God
what
gives you that God gives the sex for the cohesion, but it's really a cross,
Yeah, it is. I agree. That's why I was saying, the Hollywood is a propaganda. They try to just put the fake image to you. You're looking for the things actually don't even exist. It's like a lure to you. You thought marriage will be this, will be that, but actually marriage is not easy. And the singleness is not easy also. But do you want be alone suffering, or you want to be together suffering? But I think the Bible prefers, it's not good for men to be alone. That's why he created another person, and the from the half from Adam. So it's biblical we come together, but it's not like he said, it's not okay. The other part is the fulfillment of your life. No, you basically you suffer together. It's and also love is long suffering. It's not only the emotion, it's not only the good thing the other person gonna give you. You have to die to each other. It's just like the cross. I love it. It's like a cross. You have to really crucify each other, and it's not scary. If we can manage it, you can manage it also.
Yeah, Jada Pinkett and Will Smith, if you guys follow pop culture at all, they have a very unhealthy marriage, and they're teaching unhealthy things about marriage right now. But it's interesting if you go back to some of Jada Pinkett's story. If you go back to about 6 years ago, she mentioned how she began to cheat on and desire marriage, sex outside of relationship with her husband Will Smith. And she said the reason why is because Will Smith couldn't please her because she was watching pornography, and her watching of pornography created in her desires that Will Smith could not fulfill. Yeah. And so now the end result of that is now they believe in like open marriage, that you can love, so now they have this concept of open marriage. But really the roots of that corruption was the fact that she was dissatisfied with her husband because of watching pornography. So, yeah. It really, if these whether it's Disney all the way to pornography, the messages that come across in media can really damage right. you. And of course it's graduated from Disney to pornography being the far end of the spectrum.
Yeah,
it gives you the wrong expectation. Gives you the wrong expectation.
And let me just say that me and my wife, we just started a weekly TV show. It's a real life reality show about cultural marriage, about intercultural marriage, intercultural kids. And it's kind of a comedy, lighthearted fun, nice. And that's a website. I'll post it in the group. It's called The Joey Castillo Show. And it's just fun life. You see us fighting and stuff and fighting with the kids and in good humor, So if anybody's interested to check that show out, you can do that.
Oh, yeah. So this show is timely.
Yeah, this is timely.
I'm glad you said that because somebody else is supposed to be doing a podcast, but I ain't gonna put their business out there. So
the Joseph Castillo Show. So audience, let's follow and learn more from there. Yeah, that's great.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you, Jade and Castillo, for such a wonderful closing remarks. That was really powerful. Yeah. So beware of the media and pornography. Yeah. Mike Adams, your final words for this section.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for having us. And I would just echo everything that the Costellos just said. Marriage is a mirror, and it's just going to show you your spots more and more. So don't come in thinking you're going to look more fabulous. You're actually going to see yourself for who you truly are, because that's what it's marriage is your spouse holding up a big giant mirror in front of you. But it's for God's glory. So for the singles, I was single for a long while, and I had the fantasies of what marriage was going to be. And again, I left America going to China, definitely not looking for a man. I'm like, the Chinese men are coming to here on me. So that wasn't even something that I was thinking about. But because God is writing my story, He wove our marriage together. And for every single woman, I will just tell you, let God write your story. I could not have written this story. I promise you. even the best story I had in my mind, this union that God has put together has blown my mind. And it didn't meet any of my expectations. I did not expect to marry a light-skinned man, as my daughter would say. I did not expect to marry intellect. Troy is very intellectual in his thought pattern. I'm just like, okay, bro, just bring it down one level, please. Like, he was correcting the language. I was just like, okay, like he could just pick up words. It's okay. I did not expect to marry a conservative in so many ways. So it's just was totally different. Someone I didn't expect to marry somebody that was so entrenched in the Word of God. Like Troy would read the Bible. That was like his pastime reading. I'm like, you don't want to read nothing else. So he was just really entrenched. I mean, literally, he would wake up and his Bible would be on the side, and he would just be reading it for, many times. So it was a lot of things I did not think that was part of my story. But I can tell you, after we have been married 11 years, traveled to 32 countries, built a school in Ghana, started a nonprofit organization, helped 100 children go to school, have a beautiful daughter, becoming leaders in this conversation of Black and white. Again, was not part of what I thought my story would be, but God knew. And so trust God with your story and work while you wait. The story of Ruth is my story. I was not sitting at home waiting for a man. Like I literally was working. The reason I went to China was to work for God. And so I was always working in the church. I was always working in the community. I was not pining over. I remember my pastor one time, he said, Karen, it seems like you don't really care about marriage. And I said, well, God already told me I'm gonna be a wife. So just like I trust the IRS to send me my refund check, I'm gonna trust God to send me my husband. So it was not my everyday conversation. And he said, because versus your friend over here, it's like she's always talking about a man. She changes men like she changed her shirt. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm not going to make that be my centerpiece, because I'm also going to miss the development that God is trying to do in me. If you're just sitting and waiting for a man and you're not engaged in life and engaged in purpose, when he comes, you won't be ready. You'll be like the virgin with no oil in your lamp. You will not know what you have been prepared with you. Before, it was at least 7 years before I met Troy. I had done a study on what it means to be a wife. I walked through Proverbs. I walked through the books that talked about your character. Because again, it's not just about being a woman, a wife, being a godly partner in marriage. So what did God require? I studied the fruits of the Spirit, still working on them, but I did study them, and so that they could be a part of our marriage. That was work I was doing, having good relationships with other people that I was not dating with. I learned how to be a good friend. I had a best friend. We had a good relationship. I had young people. I was the youth director at my church. I learned how to have good relationship with young people. I even learned how to have good relationships with adult men that I did not have to have a sexual or a romantic relationship with. That's necessary for marriage. Because once you get married, if every man you look at before marriage is a potential mate, even though you get a mate, you're still going to have that ingrained mentality when you're looking at the opposite sex. So those kinds of things that you need to train yourself with is before marriage. I learned how to keep a house. I learned how to make sure my pantry was filled with toilet paper and paper towels and all of that stuff. I learned how to have a routine in my house of cleaning. My house won't nasty. We didn't start in a nasty house, and we don't keep a nasty house. Those are the keeping myself up, learning how to juggle many things. Still going to the gym, still having time for Jesus. That was one of the things that they said that would be very effective when I got married. Cameron, you can't just sit 3 hours at the table with your Bible when you're married. That's true. So what did I do? I spent more time with God before I got married, so that it was in me. let the word be in me. So then it was hidden in my heart. So then when I needed to pull it out, because I didn't have those 3 hours to say, it was there. But if I had not used my time while I was single to be prepared for what God has promised, when the promise came, I would not have seen it. I would have been just like those who saw Jesus in the flesh and could not recognize him because they were not prepared for what God had called for them.
Wow, Karen, my head is really heavy right now. Like you just read a whole book. You just read a whole book right there. Like everything was said is like a whole book from chapter 1 to chapter 10 and full of wisdom and knowledge. And I'm like, wow, man. Well, okay. I'm going to take my time to write all these things out and you'll be surprised the book I'll come out with this, but of course, all credits to you. All credits to you. This is really powerful. This is really powerful. I mean, this is really awesome. And it's sad closing. We are kind of almost 30 minutes past the time. And Dr. Joseph and Jade, Karen and Troy, you've done really pretty well. I know it's early morning in the US, in the States, but you've sacrificed your time to bless us with such great wisdom.